I got me a shed hunting story that's worth sharing. Let me tell you. It's one of them days when me, Lane, and Cameron decided to head down into the lower country, right into them rugged desert canyons. We knew it was going to be a good one, so we got ourselves an early start and made our way out them long dirt roads. You see, I've been itching to get out to this spot for a while now. Finally, we had a day where the three of us could load up in the truck and go check it out. We were hoping to find a new honey hole, a place we could keep coming back to year after year. And that day, it felt like we might just hit the jackpot. We got an early start and headed down into the lower country. Just like every shed hunting trip, we had the dogs with us, their tails going and excitement pinned on their faces. We had some jerky and a stash of Mountain Dew. We were set for a full day in that beautiful country. It was a warm day, clear skies above us. And it didn't take long before we started finding a few sheds. They weren't nothing huge, but it was a mighty fine start. Now, there's something about the thrill of shed hunting that gets the blood pumping. It's like a treasure hunt out in the wild. And when you finally spot them horns hiding in the brush, it's a feeling like no other. Makes you feel connected to the land in a way nothing else does. But you gotta remember, it's more than just finding them. It's about sharing the day with good friends, taking in the beauty of the land, and feeling the freedom that comes with being out there. We laughed, joked, and shared stories as we hiked through them canyons. The sun was beating down, but it didn't bother us none. After a morning of hunting, we decided to stop for lunch. We found a nice spot under a bit of shade, and I tell you that jerky tasted like the finest steak that day. We were about 5 or 6 miles from the truck, but we didn't mind the distance. We were having ourselves a day to remember. After a quick lunch, we were itching to get back to finding them sheds. So, with renewed energy, we headed deeper into that rugged desert. We crossed canyons and climbed over mesas, each step taking us further into the wild. The thrill of the hunt was coursing through our veins. We kept our eyes peeled, searching every nook and cranny for them elusive antlers. And let me tell you, the desert held its secrets well. We ventured far, exploring the twists and turns of that untamed land. The sun started to hang low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. We knew it was time to start making our way back toward the truck. We curved and circled, taking a route that led us back to where we had parked earlier that day. The desert had tested us, but it had also rewarded us with a few more treasures for our collection. As the sun began its descent, we could see it painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. There's something about a desert sunset that's downright magical, and it was the perfect ending to a day filled with adventure. But little did we know, the adventure wasn't quite over. You see, we had covered a lot of ground that day. If I had to guess, we'd hiked something close to 20 miles. Our legs were tired, our spirits were high, and we were ready to head back home. So we made our way back to the truck, eagerly anticipating the ride home and the promise of rest. But when we reached the truck and I reached into my pocket to get the keys, well, they weren't there. Panic started to creep in as I checked all my pockets, but there was no denying it. The keys were gone. After a moment of panic, we all just knew where those keys must have ended up. They must have slipped out of my pocket while we were eating lunch way back in the canyon. Now remember, we were about 5 miles from where we had lunch. The sun was setting and darkness was setting in fast. We were tired and our bodies ached from the miles we'd covered. But there was no way around it. We had to go back to where we'd had our lunch and find them keys. It was a race against time and darkness, and I tell you, we ran as if our lives depended on it. We pushed ourselves to the limit, our determination driving us forward. But we pressed on, knowing that those keys held the promise of getting us back home. It was dark by the time we reached the spot where we'd eaten our lunch. We scoured the ground, our eyes straining to find any glint of metal in the desert sand. It seemed like an impossible task. We just hoped that we were right because the keys could be anywhere. But we couldn't give up. And then, there they were, the keys, glimmering in the pale moonlight, right where I had been sitting earlier that day. It was a moment of pure relief and joy, a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. We walked back to the truck, exhausted but triumphant. Man, I think it was the first time I had seen it, but even the dogs collapsed from exhaustion when we got to the truck. So we climbed in, and I tell you, that ride back home was the sweetest one we'd ever had. The desert had tested us that day, but it had also rewarded our determination. As we drove back, we couldn't help but marvel at the adventure we'd just lived through. It was a day of shed hunting we'd never forget.